In Panama, the Alliance of People United for Life, one of the organizations leading the protests against the high cost of living in the country, rejected the conditions imposed by the government to install a dialogue table. The U.S. House of Representatives will vote this week to approve the nation's record-breaking $839 billion military budget. In Italy, President Sergio Mattarella refused to accept the resignation of Prime Minister Mario Draghi amid a political crisis that could lead the Eurozone's third-largest economy to early elections. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Panama, the Alliance of People United for Life, one of the organizations leading the protests against the high cost of living in the country, rejected the conditions imposed by the government to install a dialogue table. A spokesperson for the organization pointed out that the executive chose, without consulting, the topics and details of the debate without summoning all the organizations involved in the mobilization. In this sense, representatives emphasized that the government should build consensus before deciding and establishing the rules of the talks. The movements highlighted that imposing conditions does not help a sincere and transparent dialogue. In Honduras, the son of former President Porfirio Lobo Sosa and 3 other young people were murdered. According to local media, an armed group raided a commercial complex where they intercepted victims to be riddled with bullets. General Romeo Vázquez Velázquez himself detailed that among the murdered youth was his son. The former President Porfirio Lobo, upon arriving at the site of the aggression, said that this has the characteristics of an operation. However, he stressed that the special forces should give the corresponding explanations. With this fact, he adds to the family events given that his other son, named Fabio, is serving a 24-year prison sentence in the United States for drug trafficking, and his wife was sentenced in Honduras for corruption. Honduras President Xiomara Castro condemned the incident and expressed her solidarity with former President Porfirio Lobo through her official Twitter account. The Honduran president said solidarity with former President Porfirio Lobo, Rosita, and relative of Bill murdered young people. I condemn death squads that have been operating for years with impunity in Honduras. We won't rest until we unmount them. In Haiti, the World Food Programme warned that violence between armed gangs and the social crisis are aggravating the food situation in the country. The United Nations World Food Programme representative in Haiti, Jean-Martin Bauer, said that the climate of political unrest is aggravating the humanitarian crisis and that at least 4.5 million people, almost half of the population, are going hungry. The official denounced that gangs control main roads and block access to markets and humanitarian aid for more than 3.8 million people. On its part, the UN Coordinating Office for Humanitarian Affairs reports that violence has caused the first displacement of more than 36,000 people in Port-au-Prince since June 2021 to this date.
The risk of insecurity, repeated cases of kidnapping, and gasoline shortages are the main difficulties we face in this country. Our situation is critical because we face misery, hunger, and our children can no longer go to school. The government is useless. We demand that it goes. It has to go.
In Colombia, more than 100 social leaders have been murdered so far this year. 2 social leaders were assassinated in the departments of Arauca and Putumayo. The victims were identified as Raúl Alonso Garcia, who was a former councilman for Arauca, and Jaime Lozada, who was a member of the Community Action Board of the Vereda Costa Nueva. With these events, the total number of leaders assassinated so far during this year would reach 101. In this regard, experts detail that the figure far exceeds the data recorded on the same date in 2021 when 89 social leaders were murdered. The U.S. House of Representatives voted this week to approve the nation's record-breaking $839 million military budget. The 2023 National Defense Authorization Bill contains $37 billion more than President Biden requested, which in turn exceeded former President Trump's record military budget request. Meanwhile, Democratic representatives proposed an amendment that would cut $100 billion from the military budget, asserting that more guns, tanks do not benefit U.S. citizens without housing, education, or health care. Former French presidential candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon met with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador at the National Palace in Mexico. At a press conference held after the talks with the Mexican president, the French politician stressed that López Obrador has achieved a natural leadership in Latin America, supported by his experience and balanced strategy in his relationship with the United States, which is a key issue in the countries of the region. Mélenchon said that the talks focus on the world situation, migration, and the war in Ukraine. The former French presidential candidate questioned the fact that Europe first proposed to cancel the purchase of gas and oil from Russia as a form of pressure, and then accused Russia of using gas and oil as a weapon of war against Europe.
Andrés Manuel López Obrador has a natural leadership. He is the most experienced and he has the most balanced point of view and strategy for relations with the North Americans, which is a central problem facing the whole of Latin America.
During his press conference in Mexico City, former French presidential candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon also referred to French President Emmanuel Macron's speech on the Bastille Day's celebration on July 14th.
I was struck by the fact that he was in such an aisle and seemed to be so far removed from the reality of the French people. It was quite an astonishing sight to see this man, this president, on the 14th of July, which is the bank holiday that exalts the very French idea of equality, fraternity, and all the themes of the French Revolution, to have his only message that you will work more, that you will work older, and that you will receive less compensation if you are unemployed.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back from the south. In Colombia, a landslide buried an elementary school in the department of Antioquia. Authorities report that 19 children have been rescued. The governor of Antioquia, Aníbal Correa, described what happened as a painful tragedy and called for all efforts and capacities to be used in the integral attention of the emergency. The director of the Administrative Department of Risk Management of Antioquia, Diego Lopez, informed that 3 minors in the rural school have yet to be found and detailed that there are 100 people working in the rescue. Authorities reported that 3 of the miners trapped under the landslide died. One of them was rescued alive, but he died in the hospital of the municipality. The official also emphasized that the entire hospital network of the Southwest and relief agencies are deployed to support the attention of the tragedy. Peru fishing community struggles to survive 6 months after an oil spill. Called an ecological disaster by the Peruvian government, the spill occurred on January 15th while the Italian-flagged tanker Mare Doricum was unloading crude oil at the La Pampilla refinery in Ventanilla, owned by the Spanish oil company Repsol. The company attributed the event to the agitation of the sea due to a volcanic eruption in Tonga on the other side of the Pacific. The black slick of crude oil was swept northward by ocean currents of 240 kilometers from the refinery, causing the death of an undetermined number of fish, birds, and marine mammals. The spill affected more than 700,000 inhabitants and forced the closure of some 20 beaches in the middle of the austral summer. These left fishermen, restaurant owners, and employees, people who rented umbrellas on the beaches, and those who sold food or soft drinks to bathers without income. The heat wave sweeping across southwestern Europe was expected to peak in Spain, with blistering temperatures already fueling wildfires across the Iberian Peninsula and France. The region's second heat this summer is forecast to hit southern Spain with some of the harshest temperatures. The valleys around 3 major rivers, the Guadiana, Guadalquivir, and Tagus, will experience temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius. The health ministry told people to drink plenty of fluids, wear light clothes, and stay in shade or air conditioning. The Andalusian city of Almonte saw temperatures hit 45.6 degrees Celsius, while several other southern cities such as Sevilla and Córdoba recorded temperatures above 44 degrees. In Spain, in western Spain, Near the border with Portugal, forest fires have already razed at least 3,500 hectares. Germany paid tribute to more than 180 people killed in severe floods a year ago, as those left behind charged that help with the reconstruction effort as being too slow to arrive. President Frank-Walter Steinmeier embarked on a tour of the Ahwali, while Chancellor Olaf Scholz joined a human chain in the hard-hit town of Bad Aguilar and took part in the minute's silence to remember the victims. Steinmeier said he wanted to show that they have not forgotten the people of the Ahwali and how many are still struggling to rebuild their homes. However, a year on from the disaster, frustration is building at the sluggish pace of help promised by the government. Alfred Sebastian, the mayor of Brno, said the town was still at the very beginning of the reconstruction process.
We have to be financially supported by the state. We have signed a preliminary contract for 70%, but how can such a small place replace 850,000 liters of diesel with renewable energy? We have a hole in our finances and we need the support of the state now. If not now, when? Our roads are destroyed. Our heaters. We have to move on.
In Germany, the United Union of Service Sectors Workers announced a dock workers' strike to demand better wages. The union clarified that the employees demand a wage increase of 1.2 euros per hour and an inflation compensation of 7.4% if the employment contract is signed for a period of at least 12 months. The union also reported that in the course of negotiations with the Central Association of German Ports on the issue of wage increases, no agreement could be reached and negotiations were suspended. This is the third strike of this kind in the last month in Germany, which specialists relate to the rise in the prices of products and the increase in the price of hydrocarbons. In Italy, President Sergio Mattarella refused to accept the resignation of Prime Minister Mario Draghi amid a political crisis that could lead the Eurozone's third-largest economy to early elections. According to a statement from the executive, the event took place after a meeting between Mattarella and Draghi at the Palazzo del Quirinale, where the President invited the Prime Minister to address Parliament to verify whether he still has a majority to govern. Draghi resigned following a crisis unleashed in his government coalition by one of his main partners, the Five Star Movement, in the middle of a confidence motion. Although the motion was successful with 172 votes in favor and 39 against, Draghi had stated that he would not govern without the Five Star Movement, even though his departure from the ruling coalition did not prevent him from continuing. We have more news coming up after the final short breaks. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah said that the U.S. President's visit to the Middle East is aimed at persuading Persian Gulf countries to increase oil exports to the West. During a Thursday televised speech, the Hezbollah leader said that the U.S. President's visit to the Middle East is aimed at promoting the normalization project and getting Saudi leaders to supply more crude oil to the world oil market. Hezbollah leader said that land, sea, and air resistance capabilities are Lebanon's only strength to obtain its right to oil and gas. Iran warned the United States and its allies against undermining regional security after U.S. President Joe Biden signed Thursday a security pact with Israel during a visit to the Jewish state.
I tell the Americans and their regional allies that the Iranian nation will not accept any crisis or insecurity in the region, and that any mistake made in this region will be met with a harsh and regrettable response.
On Thursday, Palestinian protesters condemned U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to occupied territories. Political and popular forces called on citizens to gather in several governorates at separate times and raise the Palestinian flag during Biden's visit. For Palestinian factions, Biden's visit is aimed at serving the Israeli occupation and its interests in the region and trying to swallow the wealth of Arab countries and peoples for the benefit of the state of Israel. Coinciding with the visit of U.S. President Joe Biden to the region, the Palestinian Media Forum organized a protest in the center of Gaza City to demand justice for the spirit of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and to hold the perpetrators responsible for her murder.
I hope our President Abbas will not accept him in Ramallah or in anywhere in the West Bank, because this visit will not bring anything for the Palestinians. It just give money, support, some money for Palestinians, and without a political solution.
Ukrainian militants bombed the bus station center in the district of Voroshilovsky Donetsk. According to preliminary reports, the attack left several casualties. The Donetsk People's Republic headquarters reported that at least 2 people died and 3 injured by the Ukrainian attack. Later, the mayor of the city said the number of victims had grown to 4. Several ambulances are working at the site and the number of victims is likely to increase. The representation of Donetsk reported that the Ukrainian armed forces fired 5,155mm NATO caliber artillery at the Voroshilovsky district. The USA supplied Ukraine with long-range 155mm caliber M77 howitzers, which Ukrainian troops have already used to shell several cities, resulting in civilian deaths. Authorities of the military and civil administrations of the Zaporizhia region and Kherson Oblast in southern Ukraine have decided that in early autumn they will hold a referendum on accession to Russia, Russian news agency TASS reported. They also reported that they are working on the mechanisms for holding the vote and stressed that the referendum will determine what the inhabitants of these regions want and how they want to live their lives. Have received numerous requests from labor forces, trade union organizations, and public activists asking to determine the status of the region as soon as possible. At the same time, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday signed a decree to facilitate the process of granting Russian citizenship to all Ukrainian citizens, amending the previous version of the decree that covered only the inhabitants of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk republics in the region Donbass. Russia aims to become the largest oil exporter to India by July. The Russian Energy Development Center said that state-owned oil and gas companies have increased their productivity to supply India with hydrocarbon. The increase in supplies to India in May was reported to be almost 20%, and in annual terms more than 20 times higher. The Russian agency predicted that by July, Russia could become the largest supplier of oil to New Delhi, overtaking Iraq, which shipped 1.02 million barrels per day in June. TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other faraway nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful details to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.
Pakistan